Bruchim Aboim. Again, thank you very much for attending. We are now going to start a new portion this week. We are in the book of Deuteronomy, Devarim. We are on the fourth portion, the portion of Reeh. Again, this is the first lecture on that portion. Again, all of the portions in the Torah are connected, again, like a tapestry. So the last verse in the previous set, it talked about Pachtem Arachem, that the fear of you and the dread of you, that the Lord your God shall put on the land, you shall tread upon it as he has spoken. So it says that if the nation of Israel keep the Torah and keep the laws that God has asked, no enemy can have power over them. God alone is to be feared, not any man or nation. Again, based on Mamloes. But that's only possible if the nation of Israel keeps Torah and mitzvos. Also, this fear can work in two ways. One way is to fear you when you're good, and the other way is not to start up with you when you're bad, to hate you and want to destroy you. Again, both of them. So the portion begins with the word Re'eh. Look, behold. Anochi no same lifnechem hayom, I am bringing before you this day. Moshe is telling the people bracha v'klala, a blessing and a curse. So Re'eh is singular. Lifnechem, before you, is plural. So why the change from singular to plural? That the Torah was given to the public, again lifnechem, but each individual has a responsibility to keep it. You can't just depend upon the nation. Also, that each deed each individual does, one mitzvah, we know can tip the scale for the whole, not just a person. The Rambam tells us that the whole world may depend upon the one act that each one of us does. In addition, that Moshe was the living example of how a Jew should live. Rei Anochi, look at me, and serve God. Also, this concept of free will, that the Medrash says that the sword and the book came down at the same time. The way to be saved from one is by observing the other. Again, the book is ours and the sword is Esau's. Now, why not? Why does it say Shema? Here it says Re'eh, see. Why not here? Generally, the terminology used is Shema. That's what last Seder was about. The answer given is the person needs to look at his options and decide which is the best path that will bring him to a blessing, a bracha, and not a klala, and not a curse. And it continues and it talks of the word Anochi. Again, Anochi is the first word of the Ten Commandments. It's interesting, the Ten Commandments begins with the word Anochi, I, and then ends with the word Re'acho, your friend. And the hope is that if a person following Torah starts off as a selfish individual, but when it's all said and done, that he's able to look at someone else with kindness and benevolence, not just himself. And also the word Anochi tells us that singular, the Zohar says that each Jew has within him a spark of Moshe. There's a whole question about Moshe's death and where he's buried. There's some who says that Moshe really didn't die, that somehow his being was able to be put within each and every Jew. So here the Zohar tells us that there's a spark, just like there's a spark of divinity within each and every Jew. There's a spark of Moshe. Therefore, as if he was speaking to himself, Anochi, he was talking to himself as part of all the nation. In addition, however, how can one overcome his Yetzer Hara, his evil inclination? So the Anochi means with God, with Siyata D'Shmaya, with the help of heaven, so that we can be successful based on a gra. If a person tries to be successful in this world without the help of God, it's really an impossibility. It may be temporary, but to really be able to be truly successful, one needs God's assistance. We're just not strong enough to do it by ourselves. In addition, in order for a leader to be effective, he has to have experienced the physical pleasures of the world and all of its challenges. Also be familiar with the spiritual as well. Not just theory. And then people will listen and follow both his leadership. No one person was as well suited to be a leader as Moshe Rabbeinu. He was a king, a fugitive, a person, and an angel, part of it in heaven. He was the only one that could say the word Anochi, again, because of all of his different experiences and levels. And it says, no saying. We say the bracha. For the Torah, we say no saying ha-Torah, which means present tense, giving the Torah. And so too here. No saying l'fnechem, constantly. God didn't give us the Torah once and that was the end. The Torah is actually a living being in the sense. We know the Torah Shebal Peh, the oral tradition. The written Torah is sealed. Okay, you can't add a letter, you can't take off in a letter. In fact, if you do, it's the whole Torah is puzzle, it is unusable. But, so we see here that when it comes to the oral tradition, though, it's still, even today, with all new and modern inventions, we have to keep adding and giving, deciding laws as to, for example, electricity. Is electricity fire or not? We treat it as such. It's not so simple. There are opinions that say electricity is not fire. So again, with all of modern inventions, the Torah has been added to. So Nasiv and Nishma, when they said we will do and we will listen, that's in the future. We will continue to do so. And again, that's the difference between the oral tradition and the written. And it says that I put before you this day. Now Rashi here says, Reeh Anochi, before you bracha and klala. These were stated on Har Gerizim and Har Evel, these two mountains. Now it's possible to surmise that Har Gerizim is to the south, which is called the right side, which is chesed, kindness. And that Har Evel is in the north, the left side, which is Gevura, severity. For if it says from the north, the evil begins, based on the Rambam, on a pasuk in Yirmiyahu, in Tanakh. Now when it says, Hayom, this day, very important that each and every day a person can do tshuva, a person can repent. And as it says in Pirkei Avos, do not trust yourself until the day you die. A person should never think he's got it down. It's amazing. As they say, there's an old saying, there's no fool like an old fool. Even when people think that they've got it, not necessarily. We need to stay awake at the wheel. It's amazing how easily we can lose it. And again, it says the bracha and klala, a blessing and a curse. Now, we see that there's nothing in between bracha and klala. And again, it's either if it's not a blessing, then it's a curse. The person needs to know that. Sometimes you try to, so to speak, ride the middle. It's not possible. Things are one or the other. So again, there's the idea why the two words are together without a break between the two. Again, everything is from God. So we also need to know all blessings and curses. Now, when it talks about bracha v'klala, that they are really one entity. Oh, please, let me go back for a second. When it talks about, again, Re'eh, it's important to know that what we see with our eyes makes much more of an impression. We know the eyes we call are the windows of the soul. You can touch any part of your body. It doesn't make a difference what it is. It's really, it makes no difference. Try to touch your eye. Your eye doesn't want to be touched by anything physical. Because again, we have belief that the eyes are the windows of the soul. So again, and there's also a concept that we say, Ein Shmiya Korea, that hearing something is not like seeing something. And again, that's the idea here, Re'eh, see, know, that it's a fact. Again, when God gave the Torah to the nation of Mount Sinai, they were all their eyewitnesses. For that and also for their whole 40 years in the desert. Re'eh Anochi, again singular, that whatever is perceived by means of the sense of sight is experienced equally by all people, singularly, but their perception by virtue of their other four senses may vary in depth based on Orach Chaim. Now again, when we talk about bracha and klala, a blessing and a curse. They are really one entity. Every blessing has within it the ability to become a curse if misused. And the same is true of curses. They can be transformed to blessings. And this is why it is so difficult for us to assess what are blessings and what are curses. Again, many times it's just a matter of perception as to what it is. But absolutes are very difficult. Again, God is an absolute. But for example, it says not to kill in the Torah. But what if someone's trying to kill you? Then you kill him. So we see that there is a time when it is permitted. If you're in battle, same thing. So we see that it's not an absolute. There are times when a person has to do that. Also, the blessing and curses were mentioned 3 times in the Torah. Once here alluding to the blessings and curses that the nation of Israel would accept upon themselves when they would enter the land of Israel on Har Gerizim and Har Abel, these 2 mountains. Those said by God in Bechukosai, and those said by Moshe Rabbeinu in the coming portion of the Dvarim and Kisabo. Why were all 3 necessary? Why 3? So, the Oznaim Torah tells us that there are some people who will only follow God if the command comes from God Almighty Himself or through one of His prophets. Others have more fear of their Rebbe, a leader, than God, and that he is a person whom they see and whom they feel can look right through them. Others are most committed to something when they accept it upon themselves in the form of an oath. Just like with Boaz, we know that when Ruth came to Boaz on the threshing floor, he took an oath that he wouldn't touch her. So the Torah mentions all 3 possibilities so that everyone in his own way can find his path to Torah and mitzvahs. In fact, there's a story told of the Alter Rebbe that his Hasidim were starving and he didn't know how to feed them. And as he was walking down the street, he saw an officer, a Russian officer, and he looked and he recognized him as one of his old students. And he said hello to the officer, and he called him by his Hebrew name, and the officer said, "I don't do that anymore." So the Alter Rebbe said to this officer, "My Hasidim are starving. I need food." He said that there were 12 separate gates and then a 3rd gate leading to the tree of knowledge. And he said, "Do you know why?" The officer said no. He said, "Because there are many different paths for people to get into heaven, each person by his own way." He said, "My Hasidim need food. Please help." And the next day there were wagon loads of food that arrived for the Alter Rebbe's Hasidim. As we say, different ways, or as we say the other way, different strokes for different folks. But again, the key becomes is just a matter of getting there, whatever means it takes, again, as long as we're following Torah and mitzvahs. Also, Moshe Rabbeinu was telling the nation of Israel that I am presenting before you a way to attain blessings and a way to attain a curse. And the explanation of before you is that you can choose for yourself whichever one you want, based on a Ramban. And that's what life's about. This whole world is a life of bechira, free will. We have the choice. Now, if you look at the world, we never understood it again as clearly as we do today. God is the ultimate programmer. This whole world is a computer program. Nobody would have understood it before this. But now, today, we do. But it says man was created b'tselem Elokim in the image of God. Why? God has no image. What that means is that we have the ability to break the program. And that's what makes us that which is created, b'tselem Elokim, in the image of God, for good, for bracha, or for klala, for bad. And it continues in verse 27. One more thing, bracha and klala. Moshe was speaking about evil people who seem to do well in this world with the word hayom, which means today, which was a hint that their blessing would really be short-lived. It will turn into klala, into a curse based on an Orach Chaim. And that's important. Many times we see people that don't seem to be so righteous that do very well. Again, we need to know that God is very exacting. He pays people for everything that they do, for every sin and for every mitzvah. And they stand by themselves. The truth of the matter is that evil people seem to do well in this world because they see this world as the main event. We see this world as a world of sheker, of falsehood. We see the next world as a world of emes, of truth. Evil people don't see that there being a next world. They see this world as the world, the main essence. So in order for God to pay them for any good deed they do, they don't believe in the next world. They're not trying to get into the next world. So therefore, their reward is in this world. On the other hand, a person who is righteous and believes in the next world, if he would be paid in this world, he would be shortchanged. There's nothing in this world that can pay for a mitzvah. The only thing God can do is give you the opportunity to have another mitzvah to follow. He can give you a house. In that house you can have guests. You can put a mezuzah on the door. All types of mitzvahs. He can give you clothing so you can put tzitzis on it. There are many different things. And it's just what he gives you with every mitzvah is an opportunity to do more. But he's not going to pay you for it because you'd be shortchanged. And this is why when we look at the world, we need to know that God is exacting with everyone. And don't begrudge the man who seems to be doing so well, even though he's not a righteous person. The truth of the matter is, he's being bought off very cheaply. And it continues in verse number 27. Es ha-bracha asher tishma el mitzvos Hashem Elokechem. The bracha will come when you listen to the commandments of the Lord your God. Asher anochi mitzvah escham yom, which I am commanding you to do this day. Again, both Moshe coming down the mountain, but at the same time, this is directly from God. Now, the word es is an interesting es ha-bracha. Why es? Because the brachas will span the distance from A to Z. Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Taf is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And if you take the last letter of es, bracha, asher tishmu, spells the word Torah. That everything that we have, all benefits that we have, come from our connection to God and His Torah. Again, that instruction manual that takes us through this minefield that we call life. Now, it uses, Moshe made the blessing dependent on tishmu, on listening, even though the verse begins, the portion begins with the word Reeh, to see. But still, Moshe Rabbeinu here says tishmu, to listen, because again, a person has to listen. That if a person listens to the words of the Torah, this will bring him back to Torah and mitzvahs. Again, first a person has to study, and then from that studying, the Ohr HaChaim says he'll be able to find God. We say in the third blessing of it's actually the second blessing of the request, we say, Hashivenu Avinu l'Sorasecha, return us, our Father, to your Torah, and then, B'korvenu Malkeinu Avodasecha, bring us close to your service, to prayer. And then after that, then we'll do complete tshuva. So the first thing becomes a person needs to study. And once a person starts to study, once a person sees the greatness of Torah and starts to internalize godliness, and then really there becomes a desire within that person to connect to God, which is through prayer. And one thing leads to another. But it begins with study. Now, many times people feel, I'm really not doing things. But when you study, when you learn, when you listen, then all of a sudden things start to happen almost automatically. So a person needs to make sure that they study. Now, it uses the term asher, that you will listen. And in verse 28, when it talks about the curses, it'll say, imlo tishmu, if you do not listen. Which is very interesting. So God is telling us that positively we will follow His Torah and get blessings. Again, but for the curses, maybe yeah, maybe no. Which is, again, very important. The person needs to go at everything that he does with confidence. If you think you're going to lose, well, guess what? You'll lose. But if a person believes he can be successful, now at least you have a chance. And the truth of the matter is, failure is not the worst thing in the world. In fact, failure is how we learn. Good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment. We never accept failure. You only fail once the game's over. As long as you're still playing the game, you haven't failed. So again, stay the course. And it continues and it says, Hashem Elokeichem, the Lord your God. Both these terms are both used together again to tell us Hashem is the God of mercy, Elokeichem is the God of judgment, severity. So whether God deals with us on the level of and judges us with mercy or severity, either one, He's still our Father in heaven. It's one and the same. It says, Hashem, I ask Him Hayom, this day. Again, that's be fresh in our minds as if we received the Torah today. You know, when you get something new, you're excited. You want to use it. You want to wear it. You want to eat it. Whatever it might be. Anything new. And you see, especially with kids. But we're all kids. So a person should see Torah as something new, exciting. Once you see it as something antiquated, something that is routine, rote, it loses its shine. I remember when I was in the Army, I picked up a car. And when I brought it back to the post, you know, my buddies got in and they were treating it kind of lightly, you know, and getting things dirty and stuff. And I said something, and one of the guys said, "Don't worry about it. Once a can of beer falls on the floor, you'll be okay." But that's how it is when something's new. I don't care if it's old to someone else. It's new to you. So that car was special to me until the first can of beer fell on the floor. Called life. And anyways, it continues in verse 28. V'haklola. Now we'll deal with the curses. The curses are only Vav Hey. Again, Vav is the sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Hey is the fifth. That the curses are only from Vav to Hey. That close, one after the other. Why? Because it's always easy to go back from the Vav, again, which is a hook, to the Hey, which we say alludes to the name of God. And also that it is that God created this world with a Hey, and the world above with the Yud. So again, connect to the Hey, that which God created this world, and always do tshuva. That's how easy it is if a person really wants. As I said, Adam and the way a person wants to go, that's how heaven leads him. And it uses the word also. It's a person that the distance between one to the other for doing tshuva, again, is very short. Just that distance between the Vav and the Hey. Now, the klala comes before listen, because if one doesn't listen, he has already cursed himself. And that's important. Again, a person needs to do that. Also, the Vav connects to God. Now, if you take the gematria of the Hey and the Vav, Hey is 5, Vav is 6. This alludes to the 11 mitzvahs of kindness that can guard a person against one suffering the curses based on base Mordechai. What do I mean by that? We know that if a person gives charity, for example, there are 6 mitzvahs, 6 good deeds that he has accomplished just by giving charity. But what if he gives the charity in a very kind way? He thinks about the person's feelings. And not only that, there are rich people that still need charity. If they're on the road, they're traveling. We all need something at some time. So if a person gives the charity with kindness, then he gets 11 more blessings in addition to the 6. Even more, almost double that he had before. And 6 and 11 is 17, which is the gematria of the word tov, which is good. And also the gematria of the word chet, which is sin. So by doing it properly, we save ourselves, we give ourselves good and take ourselves out of the category of being a sinner. In addition, we know that the name of God, the name of mercy, is spelled Yud and a Hey, which we has Ka. Well, that name of God, though it's small, is actually very severe. It's tough. But when we add the Vav and the Hey, then the Vav and the Hey softens it and makes it into God's name of mercy. And that's why it's important to spell it all the way out. So we change the severity into mercy. And continues, Rashi here says, Esa bracha, in verse 27, the bracha was Amanasha Tishmu. The blessing is on the condition that you listen. In Hebrew, there really is no thing about obey. Tishmu means to listen. It doesn't mean it's a hearing test. It really means to internalize, to comprehend, to understand. Also that a blessing that God blesses a person now for a mitzvah that He will perform in the future. For example, like the nation of Israel that were redeemed from Egypt on the condition for the merit that they would get when they would receive the Torah in Mount Sinai 50 days later. When they left Egypt, they didn't have the merit. But God, so to speak, like a banker, knowing that they would be successful, gave them the loan, so to speak. And this way, when they reached Har Sinai, they received the Torah, and that was the whole reason for the exodus from Egypt. And it continues, and it says, V'sartim and aderach, and if you turn, again, the curse will be if you turn from the road, from the way, that good intentions without action are rewarded, not punished. Okay, tishmu, but curses come only with action, not thought. So we see the word laleches, to go. God gives us an amazing blessing as Jews, that if we have a thought to do an evil deed, but we don't do it, even though we meant to and we wanted to, but we didn't do it, it's not considered to be a sin. On the other hand, if we wanted to do a good deed and someone beat us there, or something came in the way where we couldn't get to it, God looks at our thoughts and gives us the credit as if we did the deed. That's true for everything except for one action, and that's the action of idol worship. If a person has a thought of serving idols, God considers it if he served it. Why that? And the answer is that God follows the Torah, and the Torah says that a father cannot testify against his child. So when we have negative thoughts, God cannot testify about them because He's our Father. But if you serve idols, if you think about serving idols, then what you've done is you've said that God is no longer your Father. And if God is no longer your Father, then He can well testify against you in court. And that's why, again, the idea of lolechos, you have to do an action in order to be culpable. A thought's not enough. Now, the reason why this whole procedure is mentioned in two sections over here, about the blessing and the curses, again, also here in one in chapter 27, is that Moshe Rabbeinu introduced it here when the nation of Israel were not on a location, and in chapter 27, when they were about to enter Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, since it would be one of the first mitzvahs they would perform when entering the land. Again, the blessings and curses that we're mentioning, that would be given on the two mountains of Har Evel and Har Gerizim. And it says again that the curse would be if you again go and serve Acharei Elohim Acherim, other gods, Asher lo yadatim, which you did not know. Now Rashi here says, we learn from here, whoever worships idols turns aside from the entire way which the Jews were commanded. So our rabbis tell us, Hamoda v'arazar k'kofer kol Torah. One sin. That if someone who acknowledges idolatry is as if he denies the entire Torah. So, even if he keeps Torah mitzvahs, but he accepts idols, that's as if he denied the whole Torah. We see in the time of Eliyahu Navi, Elijah the prophet, that it was a time, again, when idol worship was very rampant. And we have to understand, today, we really don't understand idol worship. It seems very silly. But the reason why it seems so is because idol worship was so prevalent in the old world that people found it even more of a desire, of a temptation, than sex itself. We see the rabbis, the first temple was destroyed because of idol worship. And the rabbis, for the building of the second temple, prayed to God, the Gemara says, and asked for that idol worship should be taken out of the world. So they fasted for 3 days, and God gave them the key to idol worship. And it was taken out. So what we have today is minor compared to what it used to be. People were like lovesick. This is why even the Siddur, the prayer book that we have, didn't exist in the first temple. People had within their own heart a desire, a love for God. It was almost like a man with his wife and a mistress. He wasn't sure who he wanted to be with. He loved them both. And that's what God and idol worship was about. This battle, this struggle between the two. And Eliyahu Navi, again, with his contest with the prophets of the Baal, idol worship, on Har Carmel, told the people, either serve the Baal or serve God. because what they were doing was serving both. And that becomes a major problem. We see with Rivka. Then when she felt this pulling in her womb, when she went by a house of worship of idols, and by Esau, and then a house of shul, so to speak, with Yaakov, each one pulling the other way, she was afraid she had a child that would have his feet, so to speak, in both camps. That was awful. And where do we see this? We see that, how do you know what truth is? Test of time. If something can last longer than a second, a minute, then you know it has some viability, some truth to it. Based on that, we know that Torah is true. Again, it's existed over 3,000 years, 3,300 some years. But based on that, one would have to say that Christianity and Islam are also true, because they have also been around quite a while. And yet we know they're false. So how can my statement be true? And the answer is, as long as you base your lie on a foundation of truth, then you can build as big a lie as you want on top of it. And that's why we all know